Before I leave this section where we talk about the consequences of our different strategies for controlling our emotions, I'd like to talk just a little bit more about cognitive appraisal and suppression of emotional expression very specifically. Cognitive reappraisal can be thought of as thinking about something differently, whereas suppression can be thought of as trying not to think about it. So when we employ the two strategies, we're actually doing different things with our minds. Think of it that way. There was an experiment in which students were told to think about an exam they were about to have. It's kind of cruel, isn't it? But think about an exam and think of it as this is the one that's really going to contribute to your grade point average, and it was presented as something sort of threatening. When students were fearful, because that's what was invoked, fear, they were then told to either re-look at the exam. Yes, it feels like a threatening exam, but this is just an opportunity to show what you know and actually discover what you know yourself. And it's absolutely okay to be a C student in school as long as you're an A student of life. When looked at from a more detached perspective, something that we call kind of an abstract perspective. When we look at it from a detached and abstract way, we're actually reappraising the situation. And not only does our physiological response serve us well, we have much less activation of that sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, compared to the other group. But we also tend to have more cognitive resources available to us to perform well on the test. So one might say one of the best ways to approach an exam is to say, well, here we go. Let's see what I know compared to what this teacher's asking. Because of course teachers may not be asking just the right stuff on an exam that really shows what a person knows or not. So when students reappraised, they not only felt better, but they performed better. When students suppressed, okay, don't think about it, just don't think about the bad exam. Let's go party instead. Let's pretend we're not having an exam and surprise, show up for the exam with a little preparation but not too much. When students were trying to suppress their fear, they had actually greater physiological response of the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight place. And more significantly, their minds were so taxed trying to suppress that it actually interfered with either their acquisition of information while studying or their performance. And there's some evidence to say it interfered with both. Note for next time you take an exam, right? Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the rebound effect. So up until now, we've been talking about suppression of emotions and suppression of thoughts, and thoughts related to the emotion. Well, what we know is that if you try to suppress something, there's a high likelihood that you'll have what's called a rebound effect. In other words, those thoughts, once you stop monitoring them, will just sort of come right back up again and be even stronger than before. There was this classic experiment that was done in the 1980s sometime, and you probably heard about it, where experimenters told people to not think of a white bear. So the experiment went something like this. First, people were brought in and said, talk about whatever you want to talk about, but I want you to talk for 5 minutes. Whatever comes to your mind, just talk. And all members who were participating did just that. After that, they were randomly divided into two groups, and in this group, they were told, don't think of a white bear. So say whatever comes to your mind, but do not talk about a white bear, and don't think about a white bear. And then the other group was just told to keep going as usual. And lo and behold, when you analyze the content of both of those monologues later, the people who were told to suppress the white bear actually had more times that they mentioned a white bear. So what psychologists believe is that in the process of monitoring, am I thinking of a white bear now? Am I thinking of a white bear now? What am I thinking of? Oh, it's a white bear. That it was actually therefore on the mind's attentional focus more than this one who didn't have anything to avoid. So sometimes the very process of suppressing or avoiding the expression or thought about something will have the opposite effect. Now, this rebound effect is not always found, and so I should tell you when it's not. When the experiment about the white bear was critiqued, what the people who criticized it said is that, thinking about or not thinking about a white bear is not exactly an emotionally charged event. That's more about just thought suppression in general. What if you had to suppress an emotionally charged event? What if you needed to not talk about your ex-lover who you still felt some feelings for and were very bothered that you had broken up? What if that happened? And lo and behold, when they gave these groups instructions, I want you to think about a lover you've had in your past who has simply disappeared off the face of the earth and who you still pine for, and now don't think about them. Whatever you do, when you're free associating talking, do not talk about that ex-lover. Those ex-lovers didn't come up at all. There was no difference between the control group and those asked to suppress the thought. And what psychologists believe is that we develop some defense mechanisms, some strategies that'll help us cope with avoiding certain types of thoughts. And so when there is something emotionally significant to us and we have well-rehearsed ways of avoiding or distracting ourselves from that, then it doesn't take as much cognitive energy to pull that off, and we are able to suppress. So if I'm going to kind of present this as a whole, what do we actually know about reappraisal versus thought suppression? Reappraisal tends to be a little wiser, more skilled set of strategies to use because it doesn't take as much cognitive energy. It actually allows the sympathetic nervous system to be a little less in force, and in addition, it feels a little better experientially inside of us if we use cognitive appraisal, whereas suppression takes many more cognitive resources, and if they're going into avoidance or some sort of deflection, distraction, then they're not going to be available to me to use for something else. It doesn't really mask the physiological responses, and I don't feel free. So the nutshell here, the takeaway, is that not all emotional regulation strategies are created equal. Some actually are just healthier for us in general, mentally and physically.